and welcome to Waseda University's English podcast series titled Legalus Research, Their Impact. In this series, we dive into interesting conversations and stories from Waseda's vibrant academic and cultural community. I am Yoon Jung-young, an assistant professor at the Waseda Institute for Advanced Study. Today, we are thrilled to have Professor Toru Yoshikawa from Waseda's Faculty of Social Sciences with us. Dr. Yoshikawa's research focuses on corporate governance, strategic management, leadership diversity, and organizational culture. He deals with topics related to strategic leadership and the impact of gender in executive succession, and has published his research in leading journals such as Leadership Quarterly, Journal of Business Research, and Asia Pacific Journal of Management. In today's conversation, we will be discussing his recently published article titled Female CHRO Appointments, A Crack in the Glass Ceiling. In his article, Dr. Yoshikawa examines the increase in appointments of female successors to the executive role of Chief Human Resources Officer in an effort to understand how we can increase gender diversity at the top management level. Before we get into details, could you tell us about your background and what motivated you to focus on leadership diversity and organizational culture in your research?
Well, thank you for your question. Just give you my background briefly. Before my academic career as a professor, I was in the finance industry for almost 8 years, year and a half in Tokyo, and about 6.5 years in Toronto, Canada. So during my career as a finance professional, I witnessed the bubble economy in Japan in 1980s and the burst of bubble economy in 1990s. So look at the rise and the decline of Japan's economy, also Japanese companies from 1980s, 1990s. So I got curious about the role of key decision makers such as top executives and board members, because they are responsible for making key decisions for the companies. So I quit my finance job, get into the PhD program in Canada. So I can pursue research career looking at the role of top executives and the board members, especially implication on their strategy and performance.
Thank you, Dr. Yoshikawa. We'd love to hear more about your main field of work, and most importantly, what you hope to achieve through your research.
In my research, that's a very big question. My major topic are corporate governance and the TMTs, top management teams, and the strategic management, innovation, and also social impact of corporations right now, like ESG or DEI at the moment. And I'm hoping, actually earlier days, I was looking at the impact of external environment such as capital markets, shareholders on companies' key decisions. And gradually, I shifted my attention to the internal decision-making mechanisms of corporations, namely TMTs and the board of directors. So my goal at this moment is to explore the role of those key decision makers on not only financial, but also social implications, including diversity in the corporation, in Japan, also outside Japan.
Your most recent research focuses on gender diversity at the top management level, specifically looking at female appointments to the role of Chief Human Resources Officer, or CHRO, in the US. What motivated you to study this topic? And can you give us a general picture of what gender diversity currently looks like in top management teams?
Okay. Actually, my interest was on Japanese companies, not US companies at the beginning. But so we are exploring some topics that we can examine in Japanese companies in terms of diversity in the TMTs or board of directors. Then I have a colleague in the US at Johns Hopkins University. He was my former PhD student in Singapore, and he is the HR expert. And he's looking at the chief HR officer in the US companies for some time. And he found out that in the last 15 years, the female ratio of chief HR officer has been increasing tremendously from like 40% to over 60%. So I got curious why this is happening in the US, why most CHR officers in US companies are mostly women. So that's the motivation for us to explore this topic.
As mentioned, your study explores the dynamics of executive succession, particularly in the non-chief executive officer role of the CHRO. Why focus on the CHRO role specifically and not, for example, the CEO or CFO role?
Okay, that's also a very good question. If you look at the research in the TMT domain, there are so many studies that look at CEOs, including female CEOs. There are also a few studies on CFOs, but not many studies on CHR officer yet. And also, as I mentioned earlier, my colleague in the US, HR expert. So he is asking us to join his project and explore the role of human resource officers at the top echelons of the corporation. What function do they play? How they impact the diversity within the corporation? Okay, so shifting away from CEO was a primary motivation. We look at other executives who are also key decision makers in the corporation.
Sounds interesting.
Thank you.
Dr. Yoshikawa, your study brings in social role and social categorization theories to explain gender shift in the CHRO role. Can you explain a bit more about these theories for our audience and how they help us understand gender diversity in firm leadership?
Okay, so these two theories came from the social psychology. So according to the social role theory, okay, all of us, with no exception, tend to have gendered role perceptions, okay, in terms of occupations. For example, firefighters, or policemen, or nurses. We tend to have some, the gendered perception that the firefighter should be men, nurses should be women, or kindergarten teacher should be women, right? So that's the perception we always carry, which means we all have unconscious bias in terms of occupation that we observe in day-to-day life. So the social role theory assumes that such a bias impact our perception of the position holders. For example, if female hold top corporate decisions, we don't see female as the suitable position occupant. So we have bias against those people who are holding men's position. That's the assertion made by the social role theory. Okay. As for the social categorization theory, again, we tend to differentiate in-group members and out-group members by some dimensions in social categories such as gender, education, nationality, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we think we see other people as inside member, in-group members. We tend to have favorable perceptions of those individuals. We treat them well. However, for out-group members, we don't treat them very well because they are not one of us. So women tend to be categorized as outside members for male-dominated executive suite. So that's also become basis of the gender bias.
Thank you so much for sharing such a detailed explanation. In your research, you identify key factors driving the gender shift in CHRO roles. Could you walk us through these factors and explain their significance in understanding the growing presence of women in senior HR positions? Okay.
In the CHR position in the US companies, gender shift from male to female doesn't happen not as much as we predicted. So when you have a male CHR officer, right, his successor tend to be also men as well. And however, once female occupy the position, then women succeed the position. Okay, so gender shift is not always automatic. So we found that some external forces kind of become trigger to facilitate a gender shift in these particular positions.
Your recent study also suggests that exposure to external information can influence the social categorization effect in leadership roles. Can you say a bit more about this and elaborate on what specific exposure you mean?
Okay, so to have more women in the top executive positions, there are two ways. One is the creation of new position, right? They appoint women to the position, or gender shift, replace men with women. Okay, so in our research, we look at the latter, replacement of men with women. Okay, so to have that to happen, we notice that it's not always automatic. We need some external forces for shift to take place. So we notice that if you have CEOs who are linked with other corporations that have female CHRO officers, then he bring back the practice to the home institution, then gender shift happens. That's one way. Number two, if your company is in industry where many other companies already have female chief HR officers, then they feel pressure to appoint female, then shift happens. That's the two mechanisms. The external forces, the motivate companies to make a shift.
How do you think external exposure, such as global trends and cross-cultural interactions, can reshape perceptions of gender in top management?
Okay. So actually, my earlier studies look at the impact of shareholders, especially global, professional investors. Okay, and we noticed that the global investors tend to prefer greater diversity at the top echelon of the corporation. So when the company have greater exposure to foreign investors who care about diversity, the company tend to have more female in the board or in TMTs. So that's one external pressure the company feels right now to adapt to new norms of diversity.
And this brings me to my next question. You mentioned that the initial gender shift in leadership positions is a critical turning point for organizations. Could you explain why this is so significant and what impact it has on the future trajectory of gender diversity in top roles? Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the corporate leaders often categorized as men's position. Okay, so the female holding those positions are not institutionalized, not accepted within the corporation yet. But once we have a woman in those positions, right, then people tend to see, she can be in the position. So they change the mindset, okay, which triggers the greater the institutionalization of female holding some executive positions. That importance of having a female, any first female in any top positions, that changed the mindset of many other people. One of the key points in your study is that gender diversity at the top management level can benefit firms in various ways. What are some of the specific benefits that organizations gain from increasing female representation in leadership roles?
Again, there's many studies on the topic. In the past, few studies found that the greater diversity tends to lead to more innovation for the companies. That's one key finding. And another finding is that if you have more female at the top of the organization, the companies tend to engage more with social issues. So they tend to have high, for example, ESG ratings or social ratings by the rating agencies, which also attract more investors to invest. So that's another benefit of having greater diversity at the top of the organization.
In your paper, you also look at the factors that drive the success of female appointments to CHRO roles. What are the key organizational practices that can ensure these appointments go beyond symbolic gestures to create real, sustainable change?
Okay. That's again many studies done by human resource researchers on that topic. And I guess one of the key findings is that mentorship program to nurture potential female leaders helps facilitate the women to get promoted in the future. That's one thing. The other main thing may be a training, not only female, but the male employees to change the mindset to accept female leaders. I think that the potential impact of the greater diversity in corporate leadership is that it may attract more female or other minority job applicants, because this shows that the company is more open to embracing female or minority employees. So the company become attractive to good talent from the labor market. And also at the same time, company have to be also very careful about appointing women to that role, because let's say company only appoint female, so for example, female gendered positions, it may send a signal to the labor market. The company has a bias against women. So it's a double-edged sword. And to achieve the substantive rather than the symbolic leadership diversity, I think the culture change is critical or very essential. Simply appointing a couple of female outside board members on the corporate board or appointing a female chief HR officer is not usually sufficient to make a substantial change in the diversity, because such appointments alone may only lead to the symbolic gesture to the external stakeholders. So therefore, in Japan, for example, the TMT's board are still male-dominated. So the commitment made by, for example, CEOs, the president, is quite essential to make change in corporate culture.
As the world becomes more interconnected, how do you think the increasing global focus on diversity and inclusion will affect leadership appointments in Japan? What should organizations in Japan learn from global trends in gender diversity?
Okay, that's also a very critical question at the moment. If you look around the world, we don't see any one clear direction right at the moment. For example, if in the US, there's a strong push for DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. But in the past few years, the backlash against such initiatives, coming from the conservative politicians or interest groups. So many companies in the US, such as Walmart and others, are backtracking DEI at the moment. So they're going backward. So many people are saying we don't need these kind of initiatives. Why should I, favor minority groups? However, in Europe, it's very strong. They're pushing DEI very strongly. Because some countries such as France, Spain, Germany, they have board gender quotas. In those countries, you have to have 45% women on board. But there are different directions right now. And Japan is way behind those countries. So I think Japan shouldn't look at the US as maybe Europe as a benchmark in the region to maybe, to follow and maybe, to imitate.
Thank you, Dr. Yoshikawa. I have a couple more questions for you. You moved from Singapore and joined Waseda's School of Social Sciences last year. So I would like to ask simply, why Waseda?
Okay, so I teach both undergrad and graduate classes. I teach in Japanese and English, to my undergrad students. For graduate students, I only teaching in English. So I've been teaching in English in the last 21 years outside Japan, so I feel quite comfortable teaching in English. Last year, actually 2 years ago, I was thinking about going back to Japan. So I was talking to some of my colleagues and friends in Japan, and some of them recommended Waseda may be a good institution that I should move to, because they are very research-oriented and they are trying to become more global research university. So that's the reason I chose Waseda.
Before we end, what message would you like to leave for the next generation of leaders and researchers who are interested in contributing to gender equality in leadership roles?
Okay, so as we all know, Japan is facing shrinking population and declining workforce, which means Japan's domestic market will be smaller in the future. There's nothing can stop that. So many companies in Japan need to look at overseas market, for future growth, or simply also for survival itself, which means many Japanese young leaders, potential leaders in the future, have to look at overseas as the main kind of battleground for the companies. For leaders, if you look at Japan is pushing greater diversity at the moment, but we have to realize Japan is still behind many other countries. Okay, so for young people, they should look beyond norms within Japan and see what's happening in other countries in embracing greater diversity, not only female, but other minority groups such as foreigners. Okay, and for researchers, again, I realized that it's now in transition to become more global university. I think many of us, especially young researchers, should aim for the transmitting their research outside Japan, not only in Japanese but also English. Okay, so they have more impact in the global research community.
Dr. Yoshikawa, thank you again for being here and sharing your valuable insights with us. Your research sheds light on the evolving landscape of gender in corporate leadership and highlights the importance of continued efforts towards inclusivity and diversity. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We hope this episode has deepened your understanding of gender diversity in leadership. For more such stories and insights from the co-leaders of Waseda University, don't forget to subscribe and tune into the next episode on Rigorous Research, Their Impact. Until then, take care and stay curious.